The house on Wicker Hill had been empty for a generation, a Victorian skeleton of peeling paint and shattered windows. To the town below, it was a haunted place, a story to frighten children. But to the goblins of the Grimeback clan, it was prime real estate. They were not the goblins of fairy tales, but something fouler, small. Wiry creatures with skin like dirty leather, needle-sharp teeth, and a voracious, destructive hunger. They fed on filth, rust, and the slow decay of things, and the crumbling manor was a feast waiting to be consumed. They invaded at the witching hour, a chittering, scrabbling horde pouring from the rotten floorboards in the choked fireplace. They smashed heirlooms for the fun of the noise, chewed on wiring for the tang of the copper, and defiled the faded portraits with their foul secretions. Their king, a gnarled brute named Scargash with a crown of bent nails, declared the house theirs by right of ruin. But the house was not empty. She had no memory of her name. She was simply a presence, a cold spot in the summer air, a flicker of pale blue in the moonlit hall. She was the ghost of a young woman who had died of heartbreak in the master bedroom a century before. Her spirit bound to the place of her deepest sorrow. Her existence was a quiet, melancholic loop of memory, the scent of rosewater, the feel of a silk dress, the echo of a promise broken. The goblins were an offense to her grief. Their first warning was the cold. It deepened from a chill to a biting, arctic fury that froze the condensation on the walls. The chittering laughter died in their throats as their breath plumed in the sudden frost. Then she appeared. She materialized at the top of the grand staircase, not as a terrifying specter, but as she was in life, young, beautiful, dressed in a gown the color of a winter sky, her face etched with an eternal, profound sadness. She looked down upon the defilers with eyes that held the chill of the grave. Scargahash laughed, a sound like stones in a tin can, a wisp, a memory. "We eat memories for supper." He hurled a broken bottle at her, passed through her form and shattered against the wall. The ghost did not flinch. She raised a pale hand, and the sadness in her eyes sharpened into something focused, something deadly. The war began not with shouts, but with sighs and shrieks. The ghost's power was not of physical force, but of emotion, memory, and the cold weight of the past. She drifted down the stairs, and where she passed, the very air wept. A goblin who looked into her eyes suddenly dropped its rusty knife, clutching its head. It was not seeing the ghost, it was feeling the ghost's death, the crushing weight of abandonment, the icy loneliness of the grave, the sheer unbearable tragedy of a life cut short. The little creature, whose mind knew only greed and hunger, was overwhelmed by a tidal wave of human despair. It began to wail, a high, pathetic sound, before curling into a ball. Its mind broken by a sorrow it could not comprehend. This was her weapon, empathy as a bludgeon. She was forcing them to feel. Scargash roared, rallying his clan. "She is nothing." A cold wind. Tear the place apart around her. They tried. They swarmed her, claws and teeth slashing at her intangible form. But passing through her was their doom. Each goblin that touched her essence was inundated with sensory echoes of a lost life, the taste of her last, bitter tea, the sound of a distant train whistle carrying her love away, the physical pain of a failing heart. They reeled back, not scorched, but haunted, their cruel little minds infected with a foreign, debilitating grief. But the goblins were numerous, and their king was cunning. Scargash, avoiding her direct gaze, saw the source of her power. It wasn't the house, but a single object within it, a locket of tarnished silver, hidden under a floorboard in the master bedroom, containing a portrait of the man who had left her. It was her tether, the focal point of her sorrow. He barked orders, while a swarm of goblins distracted the ghost, throwing themselves at her to be felled by waves of melancholic energy. A smaller, quicker group scrambled up the walls and into the bedroom. They found the locket, its chain coiled like a silver serpent. The ghost felt it immediately, a jolt of pure, agonizing panic, sharper than any she had known in a century, lanced through her. Her form flickered. The weeping air stuttered. She let out a sound, a soft, desperate cry that was the echo of her final breath. She flew, not walked, up to the bedroom. There, The lead goblin was trying to bite through the silver chain, its teeth grating on the metal. All subtlety vanished. The ghost's sorrow ignited into a fury as cold as the void. The room's temperature plummeted so drastically that the moisture in the air crystallized into a blizzard of frost. The goblins screeched as their limbs stiffened, their leathery skin cracking with the cold. The ghost descended upon the one with the locket. She did not touch it. She enveloped it. She poured every ounce of her century of loneliness, every tear never shed, every unanswered plea into the space around her tether. The goblin holding it didn't just feel her sadness, it was drowned in it. It saw its own clan not as family, but as future ghosts. It saw the meaningless of its hordes of trash, the emptiness of its endless hunger. With a final confused whimper, it dropped the locket and leaped from the window, seeking oblivion in the cold night. Skarkash, enraged and now sensing true defeat, made a final, desperate charge. He climbed the bedpost and launched himself at the ghost, his crown of nails aimed at her heart. She turned to him, and for the first time she spoke. Her voice was the sound of a distant wind through a graveyard, carrying a single, undeniable truth. You are already dead. You just don't know it. She opened her arms, and instead of repelling him, she pulled him into her embrace. Skargahash experienced not a memory, but a prophecy. He felt the death of his clan, not in battle, but in irrelevance. He felt their tunnels flood with stagnant water, their rusted treasures turned to dust, their names forgotten before their bodies were cold. He felt the utter, cosmic pointlessness of goblin existence. The nihilism was absolute, a void more terrifying than any cold. When the ghost released him, Skarkash did not rise. He sat on the frost-dried floor, his crown askew, his fierce eyes vacant and dull. He had not been defeated. He had been enlightened to the despair at the heart of all things. He was broken by truth. The remaining goblins, seeing their king reduced to a shivering husk, fled in a terrified rout, scrambling back into the walls. And the earth, carrying with them a new, permanent fear of the cold and the quiet, dawn's first light filtered through the dirty windows. The ghost hovered over her recovered locket, her form growing faint. The battle had drained her, but the house was silent, save for the weeping of the broken goblin king in the corner. There was no victory in her translucent eyes, only a deeper, more profound tiredness. She had defended her tomb, but the violence of the fight had stained her gentle sadness with the echoes of goblin despair and her own unleashed fury. She was now a guardian haunted not just by her own past, but by the misery she had been forced to wield. She looked at the sobbing Skarkash, a creature of pure appetite now cursed with understanding, and in that moment, the ghost and the goblin king were not so different, both prisoners of their own pain, forever trapped on Wicker Hill.